Hello, everyone in the audience, and thank you for joining me. I know it's a Monday. I know it's 7 o'clock, but don't worry. You can rustle around in the kitchen while we talk about some really cool stuff. You won't have to persevere with me much longer because I have an awesome guest here, one of the co-founders of an amazing architecture, built environment, urban design company, which is actually making big impacts in communities that we all care about on our doorsteps. So on that note, and who could probably explain it better than me, I've got on the stage the fantastic Holly Lewis. Holly, how are you? Woo!
Woo! Hello, very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Now, Holly, well, we've had a little chat before this. There might be some people in the audience that haven't met you before or are not aware of your company. So first of all, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and where you work and all that good stuff?
Great, yeah, so as you've said, I'm Holly Lewis. I am an architect, and we make equitable places. That's what we're really interested in through incisive research and impactful projects. So we've got an in-house research team. They're from kind of socioeconomic background, so it's not design really. But then we also work on a lot of master plans and strategies and delivering public realm and buildings. It's a sort of mixed bag practice. There's about 20 of us, and we've been going since 2006. So that's what we're about.
Wow, very, very cool. And listen, well done, because we made that. I've seen some of the cool stuff now, and we'll get on to that. However, you did mention to me just before we started that you did this, you set it up with your co-founder when you were a part one, Holly. So it's come a long way. However, let's wind the clock back. Where did it all start? This idea of we're going to set up this design studio.
So, I mean, if I'm being totally honest with you, although now it's a proper thing, when we started, it was a little bit of an accident. So we, as you said, were part ones. We were both, it's myself and my partner, Oliver, were doing our year out, and we entered a design competition, which was design a beach hut. So you had to make a little model, and we thought, oh, we'll go to the seaside for the weekend. We'll make a model. It'll be cute. It would be a fun thing to do. And we sent the model off into the post, and we won. So we had to build it, and we had a budget of £20,000. It was like, oh my God, we're going to have to put £20,000 into a bank account. Wow. And so we had a business account, and then we had to establish it. Then we had to do some stuff. So that was it. We were thrown a little bit in at the deep end, but our first client was Lincolnshire County Council. And that, I guess that interest in the public and how the public will engage with your work and what you're designing underpins everything. And all of our clients are public sector clients, local authorities or charities, and that still holds true today. So we set off on the right foot, although it was a slightly falling into it. It was a really great start, actually. It was exciting.
Oh, well, good for you. Now, it has come a long way, and maybe during this conversation, we will go a little bit in between. However, if we were to fast forward now, so going back from part one to all the way it is, and you touched upon it briefly, and I'm going to bring up the website. What can you expand upon your company in 2023, where it's gone to?
So in 2023, we still stand by that wanting to make better places. So equitable places is the way that we describe it. As I said, we've got these three strands. So we've got an urban research team in-house. Oh, you can see them right there. It's perfect. Strategies and master plans. So we do quite a lot of strategic and urban design work, as you've already mentioned. That can be from the scale of an individual high street, so just looking at one place, to much larger scale master planning. We've fairly recently finished a master plan for 7,500 homes in Croydon. So this is then that's quite big. And then delivery of public spaces and buildings. So that, I mean, you can see East Street Library there, little public facing things. That's a kiosk in Burnt Oak. We do quite a lot of high street related work, high street regeneration.
Oh, cool.
And this is this is the library at East Street, which was part of a bigger strategic piece of work within which we said, as part of this strategy, you should deliver something here. And then we were commissioned to do that design work as well. So Beautiful. It's become something that kind of we think hangs together really nicely. And I find the work really exciting. So that commitment, I guess, to the public benefit of what you can do as an architect has been something that's driven us all the way through. And likewise, that sort of, there's an arc of a design project, isn't there, where you're like, let's find out about the place, and then let's think what we should do, and then let's design it. that is sort of in the structure of the practice as well, like the research, the strategizing, and then the delivery. We think all of those are really beneficial, and that having each of them makes the other one a bit stronger as well. Like the fact that you understand what your research might turn into means that the research has more value, and the fact that your design is embedded with imbued with the knowledge that comes from the research team makes that design stronger. So for us, it makes perfect sense. We reckon it's a bit unusual.
No, I love it. I love it. Now, it's a beautiful website as well. And for anyone that's watching this, I have unfortunately been driving with the mouse. So poor Holly is at mercy of wherever I'm driving on the computer. So I will keep it. I'll keep it going online. But it's a beautiful website, and I'm going to quickly bring up the link. We'll mention it all at the end. But if anyone wants to check out We Made That, and for our audio listeners, all this stuff that I'm oohing about is at wemadethat.co.uk. So
do a shout out to Each London for the brand and identity.
Well, there you go. So they're the cool cats behind it. Now, there is a lot of cool stuff on there. Now, one of the things that I wanted you to kind of help me understand a little bit was about this impact report. Now, I read it, okay, and I was like, this seems important. It talks about communities. It talks about who you are as a company. What is your identity? Very introspective. However, you've gone along that journey as well. And first of all, I was wondering if you can tell us what on earth is an impact report for anyone that's not familiar with it. And then also how that ties into you being a B Corp.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we rewind to, I guess, the pandemic, and we're thinking like, we do great projects, we're really good, we're committed to community benefit and the best kind of environmental impact that we can. And then in the pandemic, everybody is talking about these things a bit more, like we're here for communities, we're here to make the world better, like architecture can be great. And we're thinking, hang on a minute, we do this. This is what we do. And everyone's talking about delivering social value. And I think for us, we were like, so if everyone's saying that they're good, then how do you, like, what's the benchmark for being better, for showing like we really mean it? For, like, our commitment to public sector and charity clients is one thing. I think that is a differentiator, but we're also like, if we want to be doing the absolute best that we can, how do we measure that? How should we think about it? So through that process, we had been considering this B Corp certification. So B corporations is an independently verified status of the highest possible levels of social impact, environmental impact, and sort of transparency and good practice. It's a structure that can be applied to any business. So it's not specific to architects and urban designers. Like you can be a baker and you can be a B Corp. You can be you can make face cream and you can be a B Corp. And obviously, when you're coming at it from architecture point of view, there's a specific set of things that you might look at. So through the pandemic, we said, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to pursue this certification. There are increasingly more architecture and urban design practices that have that status, but still not that many. It's probably like a dozen-ish, something like that. So we've pursued that process, and in 2021 we got our certification, so we are now a certified B Corp. And we've actually, because it was 2021, we've been through our first whole calendar year. It's taken us a while then, but through that certification process, one of the things that you're required to do is to publish an annual impact report, and that's the thing that you've read. So this is tracking your impact against the 5 kind of pillars that the B Corp, it's actually B Lab UK, is the sort of organization that does that, like checking that you're doing what you say you're doing, going through the fine grain of all the spreadsheets and the details that you give them. And they have these 5 pillars, which are community, customers, environment, workers, and governance. And so that's the structure of the report. So if you're thinking about community, it is the community benefits of the work of the practice, but also if you're spending locally, like spending the local supply chain, that kind of thing. Customers is definitely like who you're working with. And for us, that's really clear. It's public sector and charities. Environment is obviously the environmental impact of the projects. And for architects, that's like a special category of stuff that you get a little bit more kind of detail on. Workers is how you treat your team and the way that you deal with your employees. And governance is just that, how the company is governed. So it's really detailed. multi-layer. It looks at the business itself, but also what the like projects and things like that outputs, the sort of things that result from the practice. And you're right, it is quite introspective, but hopefully there's also some things that are quite interesting in there. And I think maybe we don't, like, we share quite readily the Instagram images and like, look at my shiny thing, but maybe not enough about what lies under that. Or, you know, everybody can take a few photos of people playing with post-it notes, but how do we talk about what's good or what's bad, or whether the projects are really having the impact that we want them to? And certainly having some kind of structure against which to measure that must be the start of it. So for us, that's what the impact report does. It's like a moment to just, okay, let's look at what we did in 2022. We'll see how that compares with last time, or how we might, like, the areas that we think could be stronger. It's a really useful framework. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Yeah, well done. I'm impressed that you mentioned the 5 points. They were like ingrained in your brain, Holly. So I can imagine it's like doing your part 3 of stuff. Yeah. You've got them there. But I'm still sure, you know, you're just thinking about it. I'm impressed. I do think that a B Corp is actually a good thing. And you're right. One of the things one day at the Architecture Social I would like to do is also become a B Corp, because I think, yes, it's hard work. However, it does feel like there's been a lot of gains through there. Now, a quick thing I was going to say, if you in the audience wanted to ask Holly a question, if you are, I don't know, juggling your dinner or whatever about We Made That, ask, or the B Corp, fire ahead. However, what I want to know, before we talk about what the impact report was, is that having been a B Corp, would you do it again now, or was it quite arduous? Are you happy that you've done it?
We have to do it again, actually, because you have to recertify.
You either out, you keep going, or you're out.
No, you don't just jump over the fence and then you're in. You have to keep going. It's serious. It's a serious business. So we have to recertify next year.
Okay.
And yeah, we're definitely going to keep doing it. I think there are some things about it. Like, I'm not here to try and sell B Corp to people.
No.
But in some ways, it's not a brilliant fit for our business, because we're in this like weird sort of across different sectors. It, particularly for architects, is very concerned with your environmental impact. And there are things like whether you're exceeding the stormwater code or something like that, which is an Americanized thing because the system is from America.
Yeah.
But then when, like, some of our reports are, or some of our projects are mapping artist workspace in London, like the question doesn't match the project. I can't answer whether this thing exceeds in like stormwater codes. If I'm mapping artist workspace, that doesn't work. So there are some things that don't quite fit for us, but having said that, it's like a weird sort of MOT, a kind of health check for the business. So there's so much stuff that we are now doing which we wouldn't have even been on our radar, I don't think, about particularly internal processes, and it's all kind of quite boring and important.
Yeah.
Some of those things about how you work with a team, or have been discussing implementing a peer review process, or is there mentoring, and some of those things that, without somebody kind of prompting you and saying, this is what you do, it's okay, but it would be better if, it's a really useful framework for that. So whilst there are some things that don't quite fit, it also is just a prompt to look at yourself and say, are you doing the best thing that you can? I think it's really helped us, and so we definitely will carry on. If I was doing a B Corp plug, which, as I've said, I'm not, but if I was, we have really noticed that people are interested in it when they're applying for jobs here. Like, you mentioned your background in recruitment. It comes up independently in interviews with new team members. Like, I have noticed that you have this certification, and it's something that people respond really positively to.
I agree. And actually, the quality of the questions that you're asking internally, listen, I love architecture. You've got some amazing companies. You've got some maybe that historically haven't looked at these because the onus has been, on building the projects. And I do think that if anyone in the audience is hearing the kind of questions that Holly's asking, and, self-reflection, talking about how you look after current employees, you're right. I think a B Corp is actually a really good, it makes sure that people, like you said, there's going to be certain standards there. So I think it's a really good way to go and look for a job. You know, it's a little bit when you talk about an employee on trust, that's one way to do things because it's nice to know then, you know, the employees are involved in that. But actually a B Corp, there is a certain standard. So you're right. I do think that the quality of work experience slash work-life balance slash culture in the company is probably going to be of a good standard, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would really hope so. And that's definitely what we're aiming for. And I'm sure that we don't get it right all the time, but I think at least that you've been through that process and you're thinking about it. There's a sort of intent, a statement of intent, I guess, from whoever that company is, that like, we're trying to be the best that we can be. And there's always work to do. But yeah, it has been really noticeable, actually, that sort of impact on the recruiting process.
Well, brilliant. Now, at the end, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about what it's like to work where you are. Don't worry, I'm not going to keep you all night, Holly. I know, I'm not going to keep you all night. However, while we were talking in this document, I'm going to put the link up as well for people if they want to look at this report, find out what's an impact report. It's very visual. And one of the things is lots of places along here. So you've done the B Corp. That's great. Now the impact report which you've been drawing up, can you explain what we're looking at here and what that process was, and maybe what you learned from it while you were doing this report on your projects?
Yeah, so it's basically a sort of against those 5 pillars that the B Corp certification was assessed against. It's a sort of reporting back on like how are we doing against those things, and it's something that we have to do annually. So we're trying to do it to full calendar year. So the next one will be for the whole of 2023. And there are some things in there. So the map that you had up just then is where our projects are in the UK. This isn't a thing that gets us B Corp points, but it's interesting to reflect on for us. And so we historically have been quite London centric. We had a big push over the recent few years to like spread that around a bit, and now 51% of our projects are outside of London, 50% are in London, and this is the geography of where they are. And I think you don't have that kind of chance to step back and have that perspective. Like, it's a piece of work to put that together and to think about it. And the impact report is a really great prompt for that. There are other things that we're thinking about in terms of not just what the project by project impact is, but if we think across the office, we know that in 2022 we engaged with about 5,400 people through our projects. Also, that's great. Sounds quite good. I wonder what it'll be in 2023. We don't know yet, but we definitely think that engaging with a lot of people is something that will continue to be something that we track. And then there are things about individual projects. So it might be the number of people who came to the first Bexley Heath night market that we did, which was great and really well attended. It was like 3,000 people. Or the fact that, I mean, the example here, the image on the screen is from the Hackney Central strategy. So in 2022, we helped our clients to secure £78.3 million of funding.
Wow.
And in fact, the Hackney Central strategy, that money came through in 2023. So that the funding, £20 million for delivery of various different bits and pieces in Hackney Central, will be in the 2023 impact report. But there is something about how much money are we securing through our strategies to then make to deliver, that there are some aggregated numbers about what the practice is doing, that without the prompt of the impact report, like stop, take a minute, add it all up, let's see where we are, we wouldn't be doing it because you're always too busy doing the projects. So there's something about the sort of aggregate impact of what we're doing that the report is really helpful to kind of structure and force us to reflect on. One of the things that we're really interested to do is start picking, like, for us as a practice, these are the key things that we want to look at. So maybe it's like number of trees planted or like I said, number of people engaged, these kind of things, that some of those are really important for us to have a like longitudinal view on. And it is a bit of self-reflection, but also kind of revealing as well. These are things that you can't look on every practice's website and see, like, okay, they did 61 projects in a year. Like, is that a lot or not a lot? We're interested in what it might reveal as we go forward as well.
I think it's incredibly impressive. I mean, one of the things that strikes me very is one of the things that is prominent, and we made that. What I like is, as well as you talk about the projects, you talk about different kinds of people in the studio, different kinds of projects, different communities. Amazing. One of the things I noticed as well is you don't just have architects working for you, right? Or you're at least looking for urban designers and stuff as well. Tell me about that. So it's not quote unquote a traditional architecture practice. It's truly multidisciplinary. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it is. So the research team have, from the inception of that bit of the practice, always had this broader view and not really been designers. Sometimes we've had people with a bit of an architectural background, but in general, we've had people who've done like politics, philosophy, and economics, some kind of city studies, a bit broader. And the work that they're doing, you can see it here, thank you very much, is doing a lot of things like looking at cultural and creative industries, maybe cultural infrastructure, that kind of thing. We've done a lot of work looking at places of work, so industrial places. This is like audits, basically mapping businesses and the number of businesses that are in certain areas, what they're doing, how many people they employ, what kind of spaces they need. These are all things that are kind of needed to feed into urban decision making, but without the like good quality information, those things can be lacking. Things like the study that's on the right-hand side there, High Streets for All, was looking at the social value of London's high streets and how change, like urban change, regeneration, I guess, is impacting people's experience of high streets. And without kind of going onto the ground and talking to people and doing those surveys and that research, it's really difficult to understand that, or your understanding can only ever be kind of superficial. So the people who work in that team are with a certain skill set that is outside the norm, I guess, for architectural practices. And you're right that we also have urban designers. Often those are people who have started in some kind of architectural vein and maybe sort of broadened as they've gone. And we have landscape architects, for example, who work on our senior urban designer is a landscape architect. So there's that kind of skill set. And I guess underpinning it all is an interest in the built environment and spatial things. So a lot of people in the practice have done some level of architectural training. And we have people who are working in the urban design team who are actually registered architects, but they're not operating as architects here. Yeah. It's sort of broadened out. So it is quite diverse. And yeah, I guess so we are a small scale multi-disc practice.
I love it. Well, I think it's absolutely amazing. Quick one before we ask one more question. So how many people are you roughly at the moment?
I think about 20.
Okay, that's a nice number. That's a nice number. We're currently 5 years, so I'm a few years back from it, but I think 20 is a nice number. I wonder where's the point where, because at one point, because you've got a nice family feel and so on and so forth, there is a number, doesn't it, where multi-disc becomes really multi-disc, so, but it'd be interesting.
Yeah, they're sort of, I think at about 20, we've been sort of around 20, sometimes a bit bigger, sometimes a bit below, but like roughly there for a while. I think this is probably the scale where there's like, you need to have better systems. And so we're happy with that. We're happy to do that. And I think for us, a little bit bigger would be good. There's something about those periods when we've been a bit bigger that the finances are more substantial. That's like just good.
Well,
but we'll see. We'll see.
It will be on the next report, I'm sure. Now, while you set up a practice as a part one, there are a lot of people who maybe are going into practice. And one of the things, Holly, that I'd love to unpack, especially from your perspective, is because as someone, a co-founder of the business, you've probably seen a lot of applications over the years. You've seen good ones. You've seen ones that could be improved. You've seen people that you've hired. You've learned some stuff as well. And especially because you've got an eclectic, awesome mix of, urban design, and you touch upon architecture, do urban design, and you have architects as well. Now, imagine you were a job seeker in 2023. Are there some bits of advice that you'd love to pass on to people that come to mind when we're talking around that part of what you do in the business?
Yeah, I think that we respond best to applications that are clearly targeted at us. Like you've understood what we're about, you say why you're applying, you're quite concise about it. Because to be honest, we've just had a recruiting round. We have hundreds of applications. So like, no offense, but we're going to be looking at it quickly, at least to start with. Yeah. So something that's concise, that shows that you've understood what we're about, and that shows us a bit what you're about as well. You need to kind of get to that point quite quickly as well. But a little bit of like showing something that's a bit different and like I've got some oomph behind me. So actually we really appreciate people that maybe they've done their own competition, or they've done a little side hustle, they've run some workshops, something that shows under my own steam I have done X. that is a real distinguisher. And I think also just concision, like as I said, because time is poor, we need a few great images. We don't need your whole portfolio. And we, again, not trying to be offensive, but just to the point, is like, show me the 5 best things that you're really proud of, and we'll have a look at that. And maybe there's a sort of breadth of skills that you'd want to show within that. And we can take it from there. But I think sometimes there's a kind of, particularly when you've just come out of architecture school, you've worked so hard on all of that stuff and you really want to show all of it, and like, oh, I really love this thing and that thing. That is brilliant, and we would love to get into it with you, potentially at interview, but for your application, you need to land a punch really quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I always say to people, think of it like I'm looking at a CV with bad connection on a taxi on the way to the meeting, or I'm in the office and I get interrupted. And when you start to think like that, then you're right. And sadly, you have to make an impression in life. And the other thing that I also say is that it's just as much the application, but it's engaging with the company as well, isn't it? I'm sure if you had a personalized email to yourself, which was very eloquent, and someone called in politely, that would stand out in the pool of all the CVs.
Yes and no, though, because I do get, because I'm on LinkedIn, and I will accept your connect. If you're something relevant and don't seem like you're going to be selling to me, I'll accept your like connection.
Not the spammers.
And then I get direct, not the spammers. I'll try and filter them, but I do get applications that come direct. Like on our website, if there's an application open, a position open, we will say, please, can you apply in this way? And if you're sending it to me on LinkedIn, I might or might not end up forwarding it.
You might miss it.
I might miss it. So like, please do the thing, like follow the process that we set out. You can always send a little message like, I'm really excited, I've sent the application, but please make sure that you're following the process.
Yeah.
Because if it only comes to me,
it's risky.
It's
you might
risky,
not see it.
My inbox,
you might have a deadline that
not
week.
Good.
Yeah, you might.
Exactly. And actually, there are people who are here. We've got a head of people who's brilliant, manages all of that stuff fantastically. We'll look at your application carefully. She also has a lot to deal with, so still keep it concise. But there's a process, and if you're trying to be like outside of that process, there's a chance that you fall through the gaps. So I would say, like, be in the process. And if you want to do a little extra tap on the like, oh, hello, that's fine.
Okay, I like that.
But be in the process, I would say.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, it's a real answer, and thank you. And that's what I say to people. So there's no one way. There's just trying to do things the way that gets the results for you is the best way, isn't it? It really is. Someone said to me the other day, I know, finding a job is like being in the punching pit, and I really get that. It's not fun for anyone. However, the more these things are really useful. Now, I was going to ask quickly, if you don't mind, because if I can just have 1 or 2 more minutes of this cool stuff.
Of course.
We talked about the application. Now, you mentioned interviews as well. Now, okay, how does that normally happen? Or let me rephrase, what's the typical process for you? But then also, what are you looking for in a portfolio? Because we made that. It's very interesting. So what do you gravitate towards in the portfolio?
Well, I would say 2 things, and I maybe should have mentioned this in the previous questions, but the other thing that we've been doing recently, and we don't do it every time, but if we've got a decent number of roles that we're looking for, we've been doing we've called it different things, but a sort of come and meet us event, which is
cool.
Don't bring your portfolio, leave that at home. We don't want to talk about applications, but come meet the team, meet us, talk about the work a little bit, see if you might be interested in these roles, and if the practice fits or not. And we'll have some beer and a chat, and you'll get to meet a few people. And that has been really nice, actually. It worked really well. We've got great candidates that way, and it also it's a little bit of a chance to probe a bit more, actually even just find out whether it feels like a fit or not. We recognize that the portfolio is a bit unusual, and so just a chance to come and have a look. And I think particularly for us, for maybe more senior roles, that's been a good opportunity to just have a bit of a person-to-person chat about what it might be like to work here. And then you can talk to other team members. I think if you come in just for an interview, you're probably meeting HR and a senior person, and then peering everybody at their desk as you maybe get shown around. So that's something that we've done a couple of times and has been really good. So I think maybe watch out for those opportunities, because I think I hope that will be something that we have cause to do again. And that's a nice chance to get a bit of an inside edge, I guess. and then we have like the guest list, and we put little stars like this person that was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe you hear back from this one. And then you're asking about interviews. So I think it slightly depends on the role, because maybe some of the research roles, there isn't the sort of visual material that that you might expect in some of the other roles. So in that case, we're looking for people to talk us through what they've been doing, and we might have some sort of questions on the CV and everything. More architectural roles, we'll always say, like, it would be great if you could prepare something to talk us through, like expect to talk us through your experience for about 10 minutes or something like that. And in that case, it's really simple, which is do that. Please don't talk for loads longer than we are. We want to be able to have a chat with you. And this is like a standing order for architects, isn't it? It's like, if somebody says 5 minutes, can it be 5 minutes, not 15? If somebody says 15 minutes, can it be 15, not half an hour? That's it, really. Yeah, and come and show us what you're interested in and why you think that we might be interesting for you. We don't do like funny tests or anything like that. It's mostly just a chat, and we see the portfolio. And I think it depends a little bit on the role. So at the more senior levels, we'll be looking for the relevant experience for that role. At the more junior levels, we're not so worried about experience, but we do want to know about skills. So like, show me that you've got an eye for putting a drawing together. Show me that your like graphic design is good.
Yeah.
That's it, I think.
I love it. Now, even the way you're talking about the process, I love it. I can tell that you thought this all out, and you've had to document it, and you've had to think about it. Because I've worked in some companies where it's maybe the interview process isn't as refined as that. And, you know, we've all been there. I'm sure that we've gone for that interview that we just thought, oh my goodness, the director's been on their phone and distracted, or it's been 20 minutes, or it's been the top down thing. But I'm so glad that you're, you know, really progressive with that stuff. Again, I'm going to mention, if anyone does want to reach out to you, that I'm sure there's like a page on the website they can contact you at wemadethat.co.uk. Now, before I wind this down, the only other question I was going to ask is, we covered, you know, a little bit about the company, how important it is for you in the B Corp, what the impact report means, and then you've given us a little bit of insight into that. So I've covered the past, I've covered the present, but where's the future going for you guys?
I mean, it is such a
you could say time. I don't know.
It's such a tough time to answer that question, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
It's a bit like fire and ice at the moment, I would say. We had a patch where we had a lot of delivery projects that looked like they were all going to be on top of each other. Those like, who knows what the future of those are. We're still seeing quite a lot of this kind of strategy work coming through. I mentioned to you earlier that for us, like, our plan is that we can be a bit bigger than we are now, not loads.
Yeah.
And we'll see how the work comes through. It's a weird time. I mentioned that we're really just in the public sector and a few bits of work for charities. And whilst the summer is normally quiet, we've had a real sort of radio silence, I think, over this summer. There's tenders that we put in May, June, July that we're still waiting to hear on. Quite a big pile of like outcomes that we're waiting for. And that is unusual. We normally would be hearing, you know, if somebody puts a tender out and says that they're going to get back to you in August, then we think that they will. Or if they say they're going to get back to you in July, you think that they will. And we're now the end of September, and there's still this big pile of things that we're waiting to hear on. So that is a bit unusual. And this is the nature of being in business, is that there's like busy, not so busy, busy, not so busy. But I think long term, I think the nature of the work feels still relevant, and we've always, because of the slightly more spread nature of the portfolio, that one or other of those sections of the practice is always busy. And we completely plan to stick with that public sector focus, stick with the three strands of the office, and keep kind of getting work that way. There's lots of interest in high street and town centre regeneration. That seems really, really relevant. Everyone's so much kind of still really interested in, I guess, spatial justice, social value, those things. Like, this is what the built environment does that's important. And I think if we stay true to those really important things, then there will continue to be work. And that's where we're about.
Very good. I had one mini bonus question before I open it up at the end, which was, so that's where you think the future's going. I'm really glad to hear that, you know, the high streets of retail is going to be revitalized. I think it's really important after Amazon's come in and just zonked everything out of there. So great to hear. What are you excited about, though? What gets you going?
It's fun. I am excited about I'm excited about running the business, which is kind of weird, right? It's taken me a while to get to this point because I love the projects and I think the projects are really, really exciting. But how you make it all work and hopefully keep people happy and do the right projects, this is then about running a business. And I think that idea of being an entrepreneur, I guess if I can say it without cringing, being a leader,
I know
those kind of things, like I'm nearly 40, getting there, not yet, and feel like, okay, I can own that now, and this is what we're doing, like that kind of pushing the whole system forward, helping the whole team do great stuff. That is a slight kind of mind shift for me that I think I feel like embracing.
Good for you. I'm really glad to hear that, because of course the projects are important. However, business is effectively a project, isn't it? That's the way I see it.
Well, and they never really, the thing they never really tell you that at architecture school. It is a little bit, and I went to the Bartlett, so it's a very specific like school that I went to, but it was always like, oh, and the real world is going to drag you down, and you know, the being in the school is the epicenter, like the height, the zenith of your creativity is going to be when you're at school, and then from here on out it's just going to get worn down and all of your edges rubbed off, and it's just going to get more and more boring. And what you find is you're out in the real world, it's like, it's fun. It's fascinating. It's amazing, weird stuff that is really meaningful and makes proper change in the world. That isn't doing beautiful drawings, as much as that can be lovely. It's actually helping change the world for it to be a bit better. And part of that is the creative process of running a business. And it's never described as being creative. It's always described as boring, or like, oh, just money and spreadsheets. And like, actually, there's creativity in that process that I think isn't celebrated enough. And I love it when people come out of architecture school and do their own thing. I think it's brilliant, and that's the thing that's kind of getting me personally fired up right now.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why sometimes when people say, because I don't practice architecture anymore, I've given that up a long time ago. However, I get my design kicks out of the business, and I'm glad that you understand that weird analogy, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's the website, whether it's employee retention or doing something and or dealing with a problem. I mean, that's 90% of business. Is that actually I do think that the founders have the awful yet realistic job of dealing with 90% of the problems in the business. That's basically what, as a founder, you do. You know, you go, okay, you do that, I will deal with all the impossible bits. And however, I do agree with you that's what I find is exhilarating about running your own business or architecture practice.
And there's creativity in that. I think that's the thing that's overlooked so often.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, whether it's about kind of money grabbing or being a banker or something. Like, it's not that. It's like,
no.
Yeah.
And we have to be okay with talking about money. And I think that's important in the business as well, because you're supporting 20 architects, designers. You have to have cash coming in. You do a good job, and I think that's one of the things that we're especially in the architecture industry that as what I felt in university. I don't know about you, Holly, but the idea of sales always feels smarmy, but actually, what's the pitch? You know, doing a good job for a client, how you win those relationships really dictates the quality of your experience in the company, and how well you do that bit at the start dictates the next few months for everyone.
But that's a crit. That's a design review.
I agree.
And they never tell you that.
No.
And there's a lot to be said about how to do reviews and how that is something that's inclusive and doesn't kind of stress people out, or isn't a painful experience for students. But definitely the closest thing that I did in architecture school to what I do now is the crit process, standing up in front of people, telling them about a thing quite quickly, trying to make them think that it's good. And that's sales, and it's never presented that way. And that doesn't mean that any of the horrendous behavior that we hear, and I've said already that was at the Bartlett, that like doesn't make any of that justifiable. But that ability to confidently stand up in front of a group of people who might not think that you're the best thing ever, and tell them about your project in an articulate way that helps them to find something great in it. I still do that.
Yeah.
I don't do any of the rest of it. I don't sharpen pencils or do ink drawings or really any of the rest of it. But that thing I'd still do.
Correct. And crits are painful, but guess what? We've all done them. And guess what? We survived them. And I think really, if you can take a smashing in a crit, you're pretty geared towards sales and marketing in real life. It's basically, that's as hard as it gets, really, isn't it?
You shouldn't have to take a smashing. Like there's no justification for poor behavior, but the idea that you can sell your work to an audience that may not necessarily from the start be receptive is a true sort of reflection of architectural practice. I don't want everybody to think that being in architectural practice is like being in crits, because I know that people have horrible times, and I don't think it's like that. Only once or twice had people be really nasty in the professional environment, and luckily I've weather worn enough that I can handle it. But I think there is something about being confident in public speaking, summarizing the work, being concise, all of those things that are skills that you learn in crits that are really, really valuable.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And you're right. I mean, gone are the days I used to think of architecture as that romantic notion, the fountain pen, you sleeping at the desk, Gordon Ramsay throwing a pot at someone's head, you're useless. But it is shifting away from that. What I was going to say, Holly, is because you've been amazing. You've answered all the questions. I've really got an insight into your business, as well as a little bit about yourself. I'm going to flip the table around quickly before we leave all your contact details, because I wanted to say, if you wanted to ask me one or two things at all, that could be about recruitment, that could be about the state of the industry, it could be about the Architecture Social, it could be about me. I don't know how interested I am, but whatever you want. Is there anything that comes to mind that's topical that you'd like to throw at me?
I mean, I'm wondering, because you mentioned that a lot of your audience are maybe sort of part one, part two, that coming from that level. And that sort of stereotype of the profession of working late, having Gordon Ramsay throw a pot at you, those things.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, I don't think that it's true here. Like, I'm the only person in the office now. We're not working late.
Yeah, you're alone. I roped
alone.
you into this. You kindly came. I get it.
It's fine. There can be robust feedback here, but I don't think it's on the scale of some of the things that we've read about in the profession.
No.
And I have personally never worked in an environment that's like that. I have, though. I'm an external examiner at the Bartlett now, and I was talking to somebody that I spoke to there, who was saying, "Oh, well, I can't. I really like composing music in this case, but I won't be able to do that when I go into profession because I won't have any time because I'm going to be working all night." Like, what? Why
Crazy.
do you think that's going to be true? Like, oh, well, I did my internship at X practice, and that was the case. And I worry a bit about this really dominant narrative about how bad it is to be in professions in architecture. And I don't doubt that it's true in some places, but are there not enough options for other places where you can work that can be the reason why you don't work there and why their practices fail? Because I think we're part of the London Practice Forum. I would like to think that those practices are really trying to be as good as they can be. You've mentioned B Corps, other B Corps. I feel like there should be enough options where you don't have to work in that environment, and that is the thing that forces those practices to be better, because people don't go and work there. And I wonder how much you think that is restricted to the star architects and people still want to work there because of the big name, or whether it really is completely endemic in the profession, because I feel like there's a lot of negativity about what architectural employers do, and I hope that we're not that. And I think that we're in a sort of brotherhood, sisterhood of other practices that are trying to do better than that as well. And I wonder if, like, what you're hearing from people is that that's still a dominant experience, or if there's enough of a choice that you can sort of whittle it out.
Yeah, I think a good question. I think you're right. There's where there's not a clear answer. So unpacking that, I think that we touched earlier upon about a B Corp, and the reason I put the B Corp in at the start of this is because I think really that's one form of verification of a certain standard. And I think that what the issue is in architecture, while there's strict remits on how you must be qualified to do a building and stuff, there's nothing really in the way, apart from the RIBA has some suggestions of what's a good employer. Nothing's really condoned. And also there is those romantic notions of, oh, I've worked all night at uni, I'm going to do the same in practice. I think, though, that version, that romantic version, I call it, again, the fountainhead, basically the architect suffering and the team suffering, is slowly becoming extinct. And I think that actually there's a big pressure on students now, because I was paying £3,000 a year in university. It was before that £1.5 grand. Now it's like £9 grand, right? And so if you study architecture, you got to do your 7 years. Really, you're only earning for 2 or 3 of them. You've done 5 years in uni. You've got the accommodation. So on average, it's about 70 to 80 grand to do architecture. And what that means is that the job seeker now, I think, compared to 10, 15 years ago, has a much higher expectation on the culture of the company. Now, we all know that if you want big bucks and you don't care about designing buildings, there are other industries where you'll make more money. However, the beautiful thing about architecture is you get to create buildings and landscapes, which you just can't do in other industries. So the salaries there, of course, we'd like to improve them. That goes a bit back to what we talked about sales and marketing and stuff. However, the culture is something that can be immediately improved, and in my opinion is inexcusable, Holly. Really, you can improve that bit. And so I actually think that students are clocking onto it much quicker, Holly, have higher expectations. And I think that maybe the 2 or 3 practices that are out there which have done things one way before, they're having a bit of a shock, because people are not sticking around anymore. People are not doing the late hours. The things are changing, and you got the glass door, and people are talking, and it's all coming out. I mean, there's a few architecture practices which have been in the news about this and that and so forth. So we're slowly getting there. You touched upon the Bartlett. The Bartlett have had to really look at and overhaul their processes. I was at one of their talks. So I think it's going to change. I think in 5 years, old, like Gordon Ramsay throwing the frying pan in the head, people aren't going to be applying to them as much as you'd think.
Good.
Yeah. So I think it's changing in that direction. And what I would say is that the companies like yourself, you've gone into a B Corp now, there's going to be the early adopters there. And I think that the ones that are doing all this stuff, I think will get more attention, and I think they will get more applications. And I think that's the way that it will all hopefully come about, because being stuck in the past and sticking to the way things were, it's going to make things harder and harder. However, the last thing I would say about it, though, is how do we find these companies? Maybe you're in the B Corp listing somewhere. Is an architect going to look in that? No. Is it great what you've done? Yes. But that's probably one of the challenges that I'm trying to do with the Architecture Social, is trying to get that directory, or trying to educate where companies are, which is why I do one of the things is I do the podcast is to highlight good companies. So was that a good brain splurge for Monday at 7?
No, that's lovely. That's lovely.
That's
good.
That's the best I could do on that,
Yeah.
Now,
vote with your feet. Oh yes, that's good.
Yes. Now, I don't want you to be in that office on your own forever. I really appreciate you being the last person there for this podcast, and I've really enjoyed you being here. Now, Holly, if people are listening to this replay or the video, or wanted to ask you a question, how do they get in contact with you?
So the easiest way is the website. You've put the link up, very nice. So our LinkedIn is there, the Twitter, X, whatever we're supposed to call it now, is there. We're on Instagram there as well. It's all We Made That, sometimes with underscores in between the We Made and That, which is on X. And you can get in touch with me personally also on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. So for the audio listeners, it's www.wemadeThat.co.uk. Thank you so much, Holly, for being here. I'm going to end the live stream now, but just stay on the stage 1 second before I close it down. And I want to thank you in the audience that joined us. If you're watching this replay, do reach out to Holly and check out the amazing, beautiful studio that she is a part of. And thank you for tuning in. More content coming soon. I can't remember what it is right now, but trust me, I booked in a few which were equally as interesting as this. So keep in tune, and I'm going to get more stuff. But until then, enjoy your Monday and speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye now. Take care.